nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Hello everybody, welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. We are live now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and Twitch. We've got 3 followers on Twitch inexplicably and 3 confused gamers or 3 Scottish gamers who also like rugby, so that's a good thing. We've got a bit of news to get through tonight. Still no actual rugby of a Scottish variety to speak of. There's plenty of other podcasts around if you want to hear people talking about what's gone on in the Super Rugby Tora and in Australia. But joining me tonight to talk about what's going on in the world of Scottish rugby, we have Ian Hay.
Hello.
And John Anderson.
Yo, folks.
Fresh off the tennis courts, John, as well.
Fresh off the tennis court. Not so fresh off the tennis courts. It's bloody warm out there.
How did you get on?
I lost 10-6.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, we're playing it's first to 10, so it wasn't too bad.
That's good. You can visit the blog www.scottishrugbyblog.co.uk for all the latest on there. We've got an article from Sandy Smith coming on tomorrow, just with an update of the Scottish-based Premier players as the English Premiership kicks off or restarts tomorrow. You can also find us on Twitter at Scott Rugby Blog or at Cammy Black, and we're on Facebook too, facebook.com/Scottish Rugby Blog. We've also got a Patreon page where you can pay a small amount a month, about the price of a pint of beer, really. Either £3 gets you into the Richie Vernon Thunderdome. That magnificent place that it is. If you pay slightly more, though, you get into the Dougie Donnelly Executive Lounge. And if you get paid to get into the Dougie Donnelly Executive Lounge, you get your name read out on the podcast. So we've got a few thank yous to read out. So thank you very much, Ree McCrory, the Governor and John McLean, who've all signed up this week to the £5. They've entered the Dougie Donnelly Lounge. Ian's taken their coat, John's taken their drink order. They've settled in. Apologies if I've missed you, because we've had a few people sign up this week. If I have missed anybody, please let me know and I'll rectify that next week. Coming up on our Patreon, we've got our first Patreon exclusive only episode that we'll be recording straight after this tonight. It's a question and answer. We've got 4 questions to answer. 4 very good questions, it has to be said. One of which is, what's the pathway to there being a third Scottish pro team? So if you want to hear us talk about that in detail, which we will do in that podcast, then you're going to have to sign up for the Patreon. We've got some exciting Patreon things coming up. We hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got a History of Sevens podcast coming to you in September in conjunction with the Blood and Mud podcast. And we've got Tony Collins to help us with that, who's a sports historian who specialises in rugby and rugby league. He does some small podcasts that are well worth checking out if you're into the history of rugby. In terms of news then, we do have an agenda of sorts to get through. The big news this week that got everyone very excited is, because of coronavirus, World Rugby have revised or delayed the implementation of Regulation 8 The amended Regulation 8, which from the end of this year would have meant that if you hadn't been capped for your country, you would have to wait for 5 years to build up residency before you qualified for that country. So we knew we were going to get Duhan van der Merwe was going to come in just under the radar, Jaco van der Walt, Ollie Kebbel, they were all going to come in within time. However, World Rugby have had a look at this, and what they've said is, given the lack of games, then there are going to be a number of players who may have been capped before December who might not have the opportunity to do so. So they've extended the deadline, I think, to next year. So that means, excitingly, that Pierre Schumann, Embra Prop, qualifies from, and I think we've got the exact date from Sandy, is it the 19th of July, 2021, he qualifies as Scottish. And we were all very excited about that because what a prospect he is. And I think he's even signed to Embra beyond that as well.
Yeah, he'd said that he was here for the 5 years. He knew it was going to be 5 years, but it was part of his thinking when he signed the contract. So the fact that he gets to come in a year earlier, bonus. Well,
and here's an interesting proposition for you guys. Is he a bolter for the Lions? Now, he qualifies for the Lions on the day of the last match before the Test series. He's an outside shot for an injury call-up, for a Geography 6 call-up.
Can you imagine?
But,
that would be beautiful.
You know, he could carry tackle bags for the tour, couldn't he? There's nothing to stop him doing that.
Does he have to have been captured by Scotland first, though, before he becomes eligible for the Lions? That's what I was wondering. No,
you just have to be eligible. So there are, I looked this up earlier this week, there 20% of all caps for the Lions were uncapped at the time that they were selected for the Lions. The last one was 1977, to be fair.
And did they have sort of the fact that there was a place of birth or parental rule?
I don't think so. Whether or not people would buy it, whether or not people would buy into the idea of him playing for the Lions, I don't know.
Yeah, there'd be lots of, he's not being tested at the highest level, and he's only Scottish-ish.
He could be the subject of a quiz question now. Technically, because you're not captured just for playing for the Lions. So, say he doesn't play for Scotland, gets called up for that game for the first test, plays a blinder, straight into the test team for the first test game, plays an absolute blinder. Razzie has a word after the game and says, We've made a mistake. We've missed you. We should have captured. How would you fancy coming to play for us in the last two tests? And technically, I don't think there's anything to stop him.
Could he then come back and play for Scotland after that?
No,
because he captured by South Africa.
Captured by South Africa.
Yeah, of course.
So that would be a hell of a quiz question. Who, a British and Irish Lions player who then went on to play for a non-British and Irish country.
Could he then only ever play for the British and Irish Lions? It's like you're captured for the Lions. So you can only play like once every 4 years, if you're lucky.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work. But I don't think the Lions. I don't think you're captured by the Lions. I don't know. Somebody may correct me on this. I don't think Regulation 8 captures you just for playing for the Lions.
It wouldn't, because
sure
you would be captured to a national team, and obviously the Lions is a selection. It's a compilation of national teams. So what national team would you be captured for? It's like being captured for Great Britain Sevens. It doesn't count.
Yes. So so that's the exciting news. So we're getting Pierre Schumann a little bit earlier, probably the summer tour 2021. So it seems pretty certain that unless there's a big money bid from South Africa, given everything that's going on in the world COVID-wise, we're probably now looking at dead set for Pierre Schumann to be in the Scottish front row, which is very exciting. I don't think there's anybody else captured by that rule that I can think of that one would be excited by.
I couldn't see anybody that kind of jumped out.
This is some random person languishing in Super 6.
Yeah, it pops up from nowhere.
Some Nick Grigg-esque.
Some guy working as a plaster and turning out for air on the wing.
Yep.
But when's good old Jaco Evander?
I think he was at this autumn.
He was the same as Kebbel, yeah, wasn't he?
Because he came over with, I think he came over around the same time as Duhan. It would have captured Hickey, but he's gone back to New Zealand now. And
that's a shame as well, because he could have been quite a good option, actually, as a we're always crying out for depth at fly half, and we've obviously got Russell and Hastings, and then not much else, especially now. Well, yeah, especially now King Jacko is retired, so
Rory Hutchinson.
He's a centre. He's a centre.
So's Pete Horn, but it doesn't stop them.
You notice how we're all of a sudden starting to shoehorn people
into 10. They'll fit, yeah.
Into 10, yeah.
Pete Shoehorn.
Pete Shoehorn, yeah. We need to cap him. Get the mesh at 10.
Yeah. So that's the news on Regulation 8. The other news this week, which is on the offside line, is that there has been a bit of update and a bit of movement on both the Super 6 and club fixtures. Super 6, there's going to be some, what did Mark Dodson called it, a Christmas dash, which sounded like something you do for your Christmas shopping when you've forgotten to buy something and it's Christmas Eve and all that's left in the shops is Toblerones and calendars.
Forgotten.
So yeah, he called it a sprint. That's it. Super 6 to return with a sprint before Christmas. We're going to come on to the interview that a number of news outlets had with Mark Dodson about the current state of affairs of Scottish rugby, but he very much sees Super 6 as still very much being a thing, which we'll come on to in a minute. In terms of club rugby, once again, rather than make a decision, the SIU have decided to go out to some sort of mad democratic vote and ask the clubs to come up with their own solution. Or to be fair, they made a couple of proposals and said, can you decide amongst yourselves whether you want to carry on with the normal league structure but regionalise it a bit, or do you want to do kind of pause promotion and relegation and play within your regions? And surprise, surprise, nobody could agree on what to do. So we're in a situation, I think, where Premiership and National 1 have agreed to keep promotion and relegation, but they will play in a kind of conference style. It's the finals, but we got some sort of conference style based around the regions. But there's not much difference geographically between the Premiership and the National 1 sides anyway. So they're keeping relegation. National 2 and National 3, much more sensible approach. Seems all the clubs are just happy to get some rugby played. They've agreed no promotion, no relegation, but they'll play across those two leagues. The teams they'll merge those two leagues, suspend the normal competition for a season, and they'll play regionally, which seems entirely sensible, Ian, given the current circumstances, rather than trying to continue with promotion and relegation in these times.
Yeah, because you're not going to get the likelihood of getting a proper, complete set of fixtures done is pretty slim. There is going to be as well, like Prem and that one. There might be a bit of travel because if you get like Aberdeen, that's probably them or Oban Lorne, that one. That's probably
Oban Lorne on that one. No, I'm going to check this now. I'm going to have to. I should have.
Well, Highland are up in that one, aren't they? Yeah. So that's probably the furthest north. But yeah, it's. I mean, that's great governance, isn't it? Sort of like we will lead you through this dark time. Decide amongst yourselves, guys.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing we had with, isn't it? This is exactly what happened when they cancelled the season. Is they said they emailed everybody and said, we're thinking about doing this. Here's a range of options, and then it turned out it was a democratic vote, and everyone's like, well, hang on, we were voting for something.
At least this time they're kind of aware that they're trying to figure something out. I mean, that's progress. We're slowly getting to the idea of.
We usually complain about them being dictatorial, but
we're gradually getting to the point of a sort of competent democracy, I suppose.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean Highland. Yeah, you're right. In Highland, National 1. So that's a bit, but it's easy enough because you've also got in that group you've got Stirling, Dundee. So you could probably stick those in some sort of conference of sorts and play each other. But it's not going to be a full season. I think that's unrealistic to try and achieve that this year. You would have thought the sensible thing would have been just to pause it all.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's my view on things across the board. I get the desire to get some rugby played and get people out on the pitch, but there's got to be a degree of sense applied to that, and just getting games played for the sake of getting games played doesn't strike me as a very sensible approach. And having people travelling about the country when stuff's still kicking off on a daily basis,
and you're going to have games. You're going to have games postponed. I mean, already in France there's a game, I think, either being postponed, or I think it's Montpellier have had a number of players test positive.
Stade Francais, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you're already looking at getting games postponed, and that's likely to happen. So it's going to be a long season.
And that's before you even get started on the behaviour of a certain other sport in Scotland. Some of the people kicking about in there.
Are you talking about FITBA?
I'm maybe mentioning the rounder ball game, yes, and certain two clubs in Scotland who will not be the only ones doing what's happened, but they've been the ones that have been caught so far, and it's a shambles.
I mean, it's not just football. I mean, you've got Jofra Archer's went to his mate's birthday party, didn't he, during the cricket?
Yep.
So it's going to happen, and I think especially down, the pro leagues it's a different proposition. If you're being paid to isolate and do all this stuff, and that's one thing, but to expect the same of club players who've got their lives to lead and jobs to do, and midweek it's going to be a tough old ask, and games are going to be postponed, and who knows when we're going to get back to seeing a normal season. So just I think we should just be grateful to getting any games played we can at this point. But October start, I think, is the intention. We shall see. The other bit of news, this is a bit of a late breaking news, not as we came on air, but a couple of hours before we came on air. Massive shout out to friend of the podcast and the blog and beard of Scottish Rugby, Ian Wallace, who has decided to cut off the beard of Scottish Rugby to raise money for Doddy Weir. My name's Doddy Foundation, which is an absolute. Ian, you're making funny set hand signals. Are you suggesting he's only going to shape it?
No. It's just that's a big. It's sort of for people who don't know. It's here, isn't it? Yeah.
He's for context given some sort of arbitrary sort of measurement technique, which looks slightly like a Finn Russell dance move.
Yeah, it's a double. It's a bit double Johns. For anyone that's watching this, I would say, and it's glorious.
It's a good length.
Yeah. So we're going to put out. It's on Just Given. If you look for Ian, Ian grew up with Doddy and Stow outside of Gala, and so it's obviously something very close to his heart. And you'll have seen, if you've been to the rugby at Murrayfield, you'll have seen Ian. Let's put it that way. I think he's even on the billboards. Certainly in a couple of promo videos.
Him and Rhiannon got in a promo video for before the World Cup, didn't they? They got in the shout outs.
News segment, wasn't it? Like Scotland Today or
it was on the national news.
Yeah. So we wish Ian all the best. I think he's doing it aiming for September. So we'll put the link on the podcast post this week, and we'll probably give it a bit more coverage as it gets closer to the event itself. I think watch the space for how that's going to happen. Hopefully, at that point, it'll be some sort of public event. Maybe get Bruce Aitchison on to host it.
That's me with a flymo. That's what's up.
Maybe we could raise money by getting bids for people to come along and cut it off.
Take a chunk,
bag it up, take it away with you. I cut this chunk off Ian Wallace's face.
Depends on how much you pay. It depends what's instrument that you use to get it cut.
Could we tag little pictures of
Farrell
himself onto the actual beard, and you can actually cut a chunk and take that away with you?
I think so. I think if we get, everyone gets a half an inch of beard until it's all gone. Get a couple of members of the Embra squad on to help. Oh, I tell you what, WP now with his butcher's knife. That's what finishes it off.
with his little rack of ribs, fork and knife, just.
So wish Ian all the best with that. Like I said, we'll cover it on the blog as well, probably closer to a wee bit later on in August, early September, just to kind of give a wee boost. But if you can go to the blog tomorrow on the podcast post, and there'll be a link there to follow and donate to Ian. The next bit of news this week, slight surprise, Philip Doyle, who's the women's head coach for Scotland, has stepped down early. Now, he was obviously on furlough, but things being as they are, everything's getting back to normal as sorts. And so the women have got upcoming fixtures to fulfill. I've got the rest of the Six Nations, plus there's qualifying for the Women's Rugby World Cup to undergo a couple of games against Spain. So because he's also shielding, he's brought his contract to an end early. And I want to say Brian Essen, but I haven't got my notes in front of me. Have I got that right?
Eason.
Brian Eason, who's the current assistant coach.
Easton, but with 2 S's instead of a T.
That's it. So he's stepping up into the role, which, I mean, it's not, nobody would have expected this and it's hard to plan for it, but it makes sense, I suppose, for the assistant coach, for continuity's sake, to step into the role. And you're not really going to have the ability to cast the net much wider than that to bring in somebody new at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive blow because, the players spoke very highly of him, whenever he was in press conferences with Rachel Malcolm, the fact that they could refer to him as Goose, I think, showed the sort of real bond between them. Had messages, I've seen messages just quick flick through Twitter from Megan Kennedy and Lana Skeldon saying how sorry the arts team go. But, with things as they are, and also if Philip's going to have to, whatever it is that's concerning the shielding, if it's going to be an ongoing issue back home, obviously he can't commit the time if he can't travel. So Brian's stepping in. He took charge of one of the press conferences I was at once, because I think Philip had to go back to Ireland possibly for whatever reason this is, or related to that. But yeah, so Brian's going to take over. And obviously, like you said, we can't really cast the net far and wide. We don't have much money. Obviously, the recruitment's on freeze.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a shame because, he came with a real pedigree for Doyle. It was a big shout, I think, for the SRU to go for him. It was a very ambitious attempt because he had a lot of success with Ireland. And the women's team had that win over South Africa. They'd started to be competitive. So hopefully they continue with that. The other bit of news that's kind of, it's a rumor that's kicked about on Twitter is obviously the RFU are struggling for funds, which we might touch upon in a minute. But Premier 15s, which is their women's top professional league, is obviously struggling financially. And the suggestion is that they're going to bring in teams, plural, from Scotland and Wales. Now, you suspect, John, that's going to be team singular from Scotland, but it's an exciting prospect nonetheless to have the SRU are giving serious consideration to a professional Scottish side.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that, so I believe a couple of the teams that were part of the previous iteration of the Premiership 15s have dropped out. So yeah, I would imagine one team from Scotland would be kind of what they would be looking at. And my only concern with it is that the SRU have got a lot of different pressures on them just now financially. And they would need to back this properly. You're talking, obviously you're saying make it a professional side, but you've got all the players that need to go professional. You're also looking at professional coaches. You're also looking at the backroom staff. You're also looking at, all the other support functions that go along with that. And yes, you can kind of pull resources from SRU, HQ, but ultimately for a new professional entity to be successful, there has to be significant funding. And our Patreon listeners will get plenty of this chat later on when we do the roadmap to third team. But the SRU would need to heavily finance this. And no disrespect to women's rugby, but there's no money in the game. Like, there's no money in rugby basically just now, apart from CVC. So there's no money in women's rugby really at the moment either. So no one's going to be coming in, no sugar daddy's going to be coming in throwing cash at a professional entity from Scotland. So it's going to come down to Mr. Dodson to find some dough for it. And my concern is they maybe half bake it and it's not a success, and then it sets it all back a number of years.
Yeah, I think when I tweeted when this initially came out, I sent a kind of tweet. I was saying it was a good move, and whether or not you could tie it to the top tier competition that we currently have in Scotland and have almost like a, where players dropping down to play in the leagues and then be able to call up almost like a regional team. But there was a couple of people saying it might be quite a significant drop off, to go from playing against, top professional women in Wales and in, particularly in England, to then dropping down and, with all respect, going and playing, what would be semi-amateur or amateur level rugby in Scotland when you hadn't been selected that week. And so it's got, the issue is, bringing the women players home who are based in England anyway, and there's a financial burden with that. But then you build up a squad, and what do we have a hell of a time for figuring out what to do with the men's squads that go spare. So what do you do with the women? And the drop off between the Pro 14 and Super 6 is one thing, but the drop off between Premier 15 and women's amateur rugby in Scotland is a completely different matter, you would think.
Yeah, because then you're going from fully professional to uni students and what have you. It would take considerable funding, considerable thinking out as well. I think there's about 8 or 9 Scottish players who are contracted to England and France. And that's one of the other things that Philip Doyle had been talking about, particularly at the Six Nations launch all those months ago, which is the last time any of us saw a bit of rugby. And he had said that the SRU were putting significant investment into the women's game, but obviously that's going to get stymied a little. When there was talk about expanding the Pro 12 to Pro 14, it started off as just sort of Twitter rumours, and then very quickly it became a reality. So we'll see if the same occurs here, but getting some kind of Scottish pro team off the ground would be very difficult. You'd maybe have to send the sort of top women's team, but then, like I said, that's again a bunch of amateurs against a bunch of professionals.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to
sound. English guys won the World Cup. We're talking about some of the best rugby players in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be down on this because I think it's a great if it's something that should be done and it's something that's long overdue, and I really hope it can work. And I don't want to sound like we're down on it at all. I think we'd all celebrate if it happened. I kind of part of me hopes that they can base it in the Borders, because I think from a travel perspective it makes sense. You've got established grounds there, easy commute from Edinburgh and stuff for a lot of the players. But I don't want to sound like we're down on it. We're just kind of, I suppose it's the pragmatists in us, the Scottish rugby fans in us, kind of coming out and all that negativity pouring out towards it. But I think it could.
Oh, we can't have anything nice here.
No, absolutely. It would be it's the absolute thing that should happen, and it's right to happen. But the reality is that there's a massive difference between significant funding, which is usually measured as a proportion of the increase of funding, which you can always make something look significant when it goes from bog all to a bit more than bog all. But there's a massive difference between significant funding and competitive funding.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Then it becomes a case you end up with a pro team that's mid to bottom table that's there to feed the international team, which is where, again, that's where the money is. You follow the money. The money's in international rugby, and as you said, John, the money in international women's rugby is probably significantly less.
Yeah.
Than men's rugby. The talking of money. We've had an update from Marky Dodson, Marky Mark.
Yeah, it's Marky
D. On Scotland's financial position. Now, given that the RFU have essentially made everyone redundant, every single person being made redundant, but I think unfortunately what's happened is they've made everybody redundant, turned around and gone, where's everyone gone? Because there's been a load of RFU job adverts up this week. I think they've just sacked everybody because they got to the top of the pay grade, and then they're recruiting everyone on lower terms and lower pay. Mark Dodson, though, says there will be no redundancies. Now, whether or not this is the kind of Chamberlain style, in my hand I have a piece of paper style promise, it remains to be seen. But you can't help but feel that for all that we are down on Mark Dodson and the things that have happened during his tenure, that this plays into his strengths, this kind of crisis budget management and balancing the books and steering a ship through tough times. He's not the hero Scotland deserve, but he's the one we need right now, to coin a phrase from Batman Ian.
Yeah, look at the T-shirt as well. There you go.
Ah,
Fitting.
Synergy.
See, I was wondering if I was going to get pelters for suggesting that Dodson is actually handling this a lot better than certainly the FRU seem to be. Fair enough. Glasgow's recruitment is on pause, as is Edinburgh's, so it's not just Glasgow. Don't sound like a whinging Glasgow fan.
Go for it, though. Go for it, Ian. Come on.
Oh, well, the thing is, right, we've got Gray and Nakarawa in, so yeah, we're not that short on looks anymore. Just going to need some kids. Time for Bruce Flockhart to step up. There we go. And I believe he can. And Tom Gordon. And so we get plenty more man of the match interviews. No, but if we can get through this without having to make people redundant and cost people their livelihoods, excellent. And I mean, we've had a few PR disasters with Dodson, so this would be good PR, if anything, for him. So it seems he's handling this all right.
Yeah, and a promise to protect the sevens as well, John, which, the RFU have basically made both their women's and men's sevens teams redundant and sacked them off. I don't think they're going to fulfill any of the World Series this year, which is going to cause problems for the GB Team GB qualifying, because that was based on always based on England's.
We had nominated
placings.
England as being our placing for the Team GB. Absolutely, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
and there's been discussion. I think there was some rumored discussions of there being a combined Team GB going forward, but I think that the SIU seem to have turned around and said that's not for us, because we're all right, Jack. This isn't. We don't use it in the same way as you. We use it as a pathway.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a number of times on a variety of different podcasts, that we use the sevens as, we talk about our third pro team. There's our third pro team. The sevens is our third pro team. We use it as a development pathway. We use it for game time. We use it when people's confidence is down. We've had probably all of the top players in Scotland playing pro rugby and playing abroad have potentially touched the sevens circuit at some point. We have a relationship with it where we use it, and that idea of then diluting the game time that people could get by saying, right, well, actually we're going to have, we'll do a combined team, and right, well, England have got all these seven specialists, so they'll get 4 out of the 7 starting slots, or 6 out of the 10 squad. Maybe Scotland will get 2, Wales 1, Ireland 1. Right, okay, we're starting to then dilute the point of it. And then you could put Gatland in charge of it, and you could have no Scots, and it would be, ideal. We could proper, British and Irish Lions it and just go for it.
And the most boring sevens team ever.
Yes, trash ball sevens.
The talk is 40 million is going to have to be cut from the budget. Now, how you do that whilst maintaining a promise to protect grassroots rugby, the sevens, and not avoid any job losses is, going to be nothing short of a miracle. If you can do it, fair play. It seems like a lot's riding on the CVC money coming through, and there was an update on that saying negotiations are going well, but obviously the terms of that are going to change, because when we went into that, coronavirus wasn't even a thing. I don't know if that man hadn't even eaten that bat in China or whatever.
I did as well see that. I'm just going to try and find it. Our friend Iltud Davith. He'd sent a tweet. Found it. The FFR denies reports of deal for the Six Nations by CVC is done. But somebody has said apparently it's imminent. The truth about this press release is that Bernard Laporte spoke too soon about the deal.
That's classic. That's classic Bernard Laporte.
As a result, the FFR has come under strong pressure from the Welsh Rugby Union, who are negotiating to lower the salaries of their players.
Oh dear.
So we update on that. That was only a couple of hours ago.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. Someone's got Bernard pissed on the red wine and said, "How's the CVC gone, Bernard? He's fine.
Bien.
Bien sûr. It's nearly over the line.
Fine for all of us."
Yeah.
So you can have 30 million. You can have 30 million. You have 30. It's all good.
There is talk. I mean, I think the one thing Mark Dodson did say when he spoke to the press was that the wage cuts that have been agreed with the likes of himself and Gregor Townsend and Richard Cockrell and Danny Wilson. Well, I don't think Danny Wilson, because he was signed a new contract before March.
He's just had a wage cut from what Rennie was pocketing.
So, but Richard Cockrell and Gregor Townsend have taken wage cuts, and it seemed, and for a certain period they were deferring wages. So it seems like that's going to continue. The positive news is it sounds like there are ongoing discussions with them both about new contracts from 2021, which I think is when both their deals run out. So, given how things were left with Gregor Townsend, left the Six Nations on a fairly positive note. Whether or not those negotiations happened after the autumn, we'll see. Maybe it might be a different kind of contract negotiation for Richard Cockrell at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Edinburgh might be Pro 14 winners, but then John perished the thought.
Let's be absolutely clear. I'm putting this out there. You can send me all the hate you want when the time comes. Edinburgh will not be Pro 14 champions. There is a D4 stitch up to make sure that is not going to happen. So I would be surprised. I mean, they'll make the semis and then they'll get absolutely pummeled. All right, that's what's going to happen.
They'll get Hugh Baird.
They'll get Hugh Baird.
Here we are. So that is 20:09 on this very day.
The 12th of August.
The 12th of the month of August.
I will return to this podcast and snip that bit when Ember make the final, Jordan. We'll play it on a loop.
Play it in a loop. It's fine. I have absolute confidence.
Just be two-hand crashing over for the match-winning try. Cut between that and John's face.
Beautiful Johnny Bravo, man.
Ian Wallace, thank you very much to everyone that's watching this live. By the way, we've got quite a few people watching with us, including my mother. Hello, Mum.
Hey, Cammy's mum.
Ian Wallace says questions have to be asked how the RFU have gone from running the most profitable Rugby World Cup to paying off a third of their staff within 4 years. I'm not sure how profitable that Rugby World Cup was. I don't think it was as profitable as they made it out to be.
You can make anything look good on paper, can't you? Really?
Yeah. I think they took the fact that I can't remember where I've read this, and this might be completely untrue, and I might be making it up, but I'm sure it is. But I think the fact that England didn't make it out the group stage had a massive impact. Yeah, try not to laugh, Ian. It had a massive impact on the finances of the RFU. I think the fact that the no home nation made did anyone make the semis?
Southern Hemisphere.
No, Cammy, nobody made the semis.
I know we didn't.
We were the last one standing.
We were, of course.
We were Joubert.
So there's
the 79th minute.
So all Southern Hemisphere teams in a Northern Hemisphere World Cup, that is going to hit the pockets hard in terms of maintaining interest in the tournament. So I think that I'm pretty sure that had an impact. I'm sure someone's done a graph somewhere that shows that.
I mean, even not just in like ticket sales and that and merch, even like pubs, they would have lost a lot. I think it would probably be worth millions to the economy as overall, not just the RFU's pocket.
The RFU have been looking like an absolute train wreck financially for 2 or 3 years now. And that was before all this. It's like, they were already talking about deferring like wage and bonuses and things like that, and people having to take cuts, people being made redundant. And then all this happens. It's like, we talk about...
What they've done with the women's team, for example, they kept on sort of like, they cut the 15s to fund the 7s, then cut the 7s to fund the 15s.
Rob and Peter paid Paul the whole time, and they could do better than, I think there's a lesson here in financial prudence. They could get themselves a Mark Dodson and get themselves profitable.
I was surprised. I mean, that was the big surprise to me, that when that vacancy came up for chief executive, that was because at the time it came up, they were in trouble financially. And that role is tailor-made for Mark Dodson. And you think, I was surprised. Well, I think we can find out why, given the massive bonus he was sitting waiting to get, as to why he maybe didn't apply for the job. But that's speculation. However, that job at that time, Scotland needed a more conciliatory chief executive. Obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, it's quite good. I'm pleased we've got him, given the current climate. But at that time, I was surprised he didn't go for it. And because I think at that point, Scottish rugby would have probably happily let him go and looked for maybe someone that was a bit more of a less of a firefighter and maybe more of a captain to steer the way through gentler waters.
I loved how you used the term earlier on, financial emergency, when describing what he was good at. You very specifically emphasised financial. It's like, yeah, he cannot be trusted in any other crisis whatsoever. Give us a tsunami. No, this guy not for us. Give us a bank account. We're fine. We're solid.
Sit him in front of the accounts, keep him away from the press, and
give him a spreadsheet. No PR.
Decisions about grassroots rugby. Fine.
Tell us a number, Doddy. Tell us a number.
Yeah. How much can we have? That should be his role. Tell us how much we can have. And we'll decide what to spend it on.
Pretty sure that's what Scott Johnson done, didn't he?
I think that's it. Yeah, there we go. So that's the news as it was. I'm not going to do the Hands in the Ruck jingle this week because I've not got it queued up. And to be honest, I'm
He's
on Twitter from somebody who said that he was going to who's Ian. You look unsure.
Yeah, sorry. I think John also experienced that you froze. So
I froze, did I?
You have no idea what you're talking about.
We were concerned we were going to have to fill there for a second. So there was pressure on, sweat in the brow.
I could just pretend it did see my net connection was unstable. I could just.
Very good. That's
I see that worked, didn't it?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. You could be, was it Dimmock that done the whole, was absolutely knee deep in a rant and just about to get to the crescendo of it?
That was Al Kerr.
Wasn't it? Yeah. And he just cut out. You're like,
and he kept going though. That's it on his end.
Yeah, he was like 20 minutes later. He was still going offline. Legend.
It's time for Hands in the Ruck anyway. We've had one off Twitter. I'm going to try and dig that out. Ian, have you got Hands in the Ruck for this week?
Well, seeing as it's the any other news section and not just the I'm going to have a moan about something, I was going to highlight incidences such as Ian Wallace's beer shop, because there's been a lot of good fundraising by I hate this term, the rugby family. And even during the pandemic, it's still going. But so good on yous. So yeah, that's me being chipper. That's the best you get.
Big shout out to Bonus Rugby Club, who this weekend were doing kind of trying to get around the world or something at various attempts, but they were finishing off in a pedalo.
Yeah, Bruce Aitchison and Ian Wallace were there, and Sean Lennon there as well.
Yeah, Sean Lennon turned up, I think, to support them, and a few.
Alex Groves
others.
was up to something as well.
He swam the English Channel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Raised quite a lot of money as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did very well.
Grand.
Yeah.
Good boy.
I think I saw it in Gav Harper's. Sorry, there's a moth in here. I saw it in Gav Harper's article. 20 grand. I'm pretty sure it was.
Jacko, King Richie, et al. Are cycling for the WA, aren't they, as well?
Yeah. So there's a lot, like you said, Ian, there's a lot of good. It's easy to be down and negative at the minute, but there's a lot of good in the world. There's a lot of good people doing good things. On that note, it's Mikey writes and complains that every time there's a clip on Twitter of Trap Promote Rugby returning or doing something, it's always the Scotland team getting beat. And it's the Pro 14 have done it this time with Dragons scoring a try against the Glasgow Warriors.
That doesn't happen often either.
I was going to say, I can imagine they've had to dig pretty deep. I mean, it's the new kit. You didn't lose to the Dragons recently, did you?
It's been a while.
I know.
We did have an absolutely honking start to last season where we kind of lost to everybody, so it might have been then.
We snuck it that one, because that's when Brandon Thompson had that total meltdown, basically.
Was that not just... I remember coming on the pod after that and being like, that was literally the worst rugby performance I've seen.
I still think we managed to sneak it, because Dragons are that bad.
I'm not convinced we did, actually.
Do you know, I was watching the Under the Sticks, which is the Pro 14 kind of podcast live watch along of the Chiefs, and I don't know the Chiefs were playing. Chiefs lost anyway. And the Sean Hawley was on there, and he was trying to justify the fact that Warren Gatland had lost 9 games in a row by saying, he said basically the standard of competition in New Zealand is really high, and the Chiefs are the worst team in New Zealand, apparently. So it's a bit like he said, it's a bit like if the Dragons just played the teams in Wales, because they haven't got a chance to play the poor teams in Australia and South Africa. And I thought, has he seen the Dragons play teams outside of Wales? Because the results aren't much different. There was that point where it was someone set up an account at one point, which is have the Dragons lost again? And the answer was always yes.
The thing with the Dragons as well, like suggesting that. So what he's suggesting then, just for I'm going to play stupid here for a second. He's suggesting that the Welsh teams are essentially the equivalent of the New Zealand franchises within Super Rugby, who regularly win the tournament and are competing at the highest level, supplying some of the best rugby players in the world. And he's ignoring the fact that you have, I don't know, there's some Irish team over the water. I can't remember their name. They seem to be like they're there or thereabouts for these European Cup things that kind of happen now and then, like Leicester or Leinster or something. Ignoring the fact they exist, as well as the other, obviously Glasgow champions, Connacht champions, Leinster perennial champions, Munster have won it, Ulster have won it.
Even one of the Italian teams are better than Dragons now.
Yeah, the one that's got Cana just playing absolute mad, crazy rugby.
Benetton. Mind there used to be Benetton Treviso. Apparently, they've dropped Treviso now, I think, or is it the other way around? They've dropped one part of their name.
They've dropped. I always found it really useful to tell you where you were getting the dodgy kind of camera work from, like, because then you could be like, I do not want to go there on holiday.
Apparently, it's lovely.
Apparently it is lovely, yeah, but I've got, you know how you have those kind of irrational hatreds of places just based on like silly rugby things. Like I remember it was Tommy Seymour scoring in the corner and they had like this hedge round the edge of the park, and that was me. I was really upset for a long time.
Was it not properly trimmed? Is that what they?
No, it was. I mean, it was an immaculate hedge, but still, there's a time and a place for a hedge, and like Tommy Seymour scoring in the corner is not that hedge, See,
what if he dove through the hedge and made it look really dramatic?
That would have been really cool. I would have like if he had went and scored like one hand down, boosh, and then just charged like through the hedge, straight through the hedge, like smashing it.
I think like with a Tommy Seymour shaped hole in it.
Yeah. Oh,
like a bit like when like Wile E. Coyote goes through a wall.
Yes. See, we're all on point. We're all on point here. This is great.
Remember that strange Saturday night TV show Hole in the Wall that lasted for about a series?
Was that the one they had to do like the mad shapes and the wall came towards?
Yeah, slowly moving wall would come towards a sort of C-list celebrity, and then they had to contort themselves into the shape to get through it.
I had a strange Xbox Connect game that had done the same thing. It was very, very weird, and obviously I'm not built to be like in any way, shape or form flexible.
And that sounds a bit yoga-ish. Or Pilates.
Yeah, it was all a bit strange, and I'm not built for that.
Or tennis, so it seems.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Did you, aside from Italian hedges, did you have a hands in the ruck, John?
I was going to have a wee rant. Going to have another wee rant. So the news today, 12 hours ago, regarding any club unable to fulfil a fixture in the English Premiership due to Mr. COVID-19 will be given a 20-0 defeat. Now, this is absolutely and utterly bonkers. And the reason for this is they're going down the route of like, so we're going to have testing, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. But they're basically victimizing people who catch this virus, suggesting that players are, I don't know, the implication is that players should be immune because they're in their bubbles and they're training and they're doing all the right things. That kind of takes away from the idea that, I don't know, they might actually be out in public. They may go for a walk in the park. They may do some other things that they are legitimately allowed to do. I can understand the idea of putting sanctions in place if teams miss fixtures because of, as previously mentioned, idiots going to the pub or idiots, deciding to sack it off to Spain without telling anybody and then come back and not bother quarantining. That's fine. If that happens and you miss a fixture, fine. Absolutely. Smash them in the head for that. But to penalise people for getting ill in the midst of all this is completely wrong, and I think English rugby have called it so badly.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think, particularly because I think they're talking about doing this like not just at top level. This is like club level as well.
Yep.
Which is utterly ridiculous that you would do. You know, like you said, people have got jobs and careers, and you'll have key workers who want to play rugby, and
it's going to be family members who are in contact with other folk, and
exactly. And I think it's
especially England's still a hotbed.
Oh, I know. Like literally, where I am, which is South Leeds. I mean, there's parts of Leeds that are on lockdown. If I go 5 minutes in any direction apart from north towards Leeds, there's extra lockdown measures in place. Do you know what I mean? Not where I am. I'm quite lucky, but I couldn't go in. If I went 5 minutes down the road to a friend's house, I couldn't go in their garden. They could come to me and go in my garden. I wouldn't let them, but it's so you've got all
Get
these
out of my garden, you.
You're gonna have all these different. You're gonna have all these different rules coming in, all these different lockdown areas, like you said, John. It's not. I don't think that's a fair ruling. I think, like you said, if you have a group within the squad that demonstrably have broken rules, gone on holiday, gone to a mate's birthday party, 50 an illegal rave, then
hosted by Finn Russell.
Yeah, of course.
Amazing.
Wouldn't we
the
all?
Only type of illegal rave.
Then I think then that's different. But I think for people that are going about their daily lives, this, and people don't, you hear people that are, a lot of people are asymptomatic. Don't even know you've got till you get tested. So,
yeah, the Djokovic clan, they were all asymptomatic, and we all knew how that went.
Yeah,
there's other words for the Djokovic clan as well, Ian, that we'll not touch on in this podcast.
It was the 5Gs that did it.
Always when I hear the term 5G, I think of the dodgeball and the 4Ds of dodgeball. Or the
dodge, duck, dive, and dodge.
Yeah, but the 5Ds of duck, dive, dip, dodge, and dive.
Dodge, it's dodge twice. It's dodge
twice.
Duck, dive, dodge. I
don't know. But anyway, 5Gs make me think of that.
My hands in the ruck just to finish. If anyone knows Fill Your Boots Rugby, who are they're on Twitter and Facebook, and they put out they help clubs to find players when they're a player short. So it's a really good, valuable service. Trying to match, clubs that might be a man down at a weekend with someone that's got a pair of boots and they'll happily turn out for them. They do a regular round table on their Facebook page, and they've invited me to take part in that tomorrow about grassroots rugby in Scotland. So that's, I think, 6:30 tomorrow night. One thing that was kind of got the hands in my ruck this week was they posted a thing on Twitter that said basically, the RFU are proposing a return to play and it's going to be touch. That's how we're going to go back to rugby. We're going to play, everyone's going to be playing touch. And I said, well, look, I think that's a great idea. Actually, I would go back if my local rugby club had a touch team or did touch sessions. I'd be there in a flash. It's a good way to keep them fit, meet people. I'd quite happily go and do that. I'm too long in the tooth and too far away from playing competitive rugby to have someone come and hit me. Right, that would break me in two. I can't take contact. And part of the reason I gave up rugby was I didn't like taking contact either. Like playing the game, didn't like taking contact. It's a big issue. But so I said that comes in. I'm there in a flash. I think it's a good way of getting a lot of people my age in the late 30s, early 40s who've maybe been away from the game for a while back into the game and back in the clubhouses. There was somebody who remained nameless because I don't give him the oxygen, who got back and said, I've been playing the game for 18 years. If they do that, that's the game for me. I'm giving up. What do you do with that? Bye. Do you know if contact is that important to you, go and do UFC. If contact is more important to you than being with your mates, being down a club and seeing people and getting to know people and having that community, then if going and smashing a guy is more important to you than all of that, then
go and play rugby league. That's what.
This guy has nailed it.
Well, go and do boxing. Go and do if that's what you're craving. If you're craving the physical touch of another man, there are places that cater for that.
I mean, surely the whole point in rugby is you find the space and you score a try.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the whole
you might have Ian, that some people are, let's say, not built for finding space. Some people, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, have built a game around not finding the space.
Well, did you see Squidge's BT thing?
Yes.
About Exeter, for example, they're not ones for really finding space. And then,
No.
yes, he was talking about other
Yes.
things.
And-
Northampton attack space. You know,
Yeah.
that's so. If you're going to play touch, look at Northampton. Not
Sale
Play touch like
rely on
Northampton.
Sale rely entirely on Byron McGuigan for space, and
Intercepting.
somehow that's worked for them.
Why?
How? I have no idea.
My favourite thing about Byron McGuigan is that there's still a hardcore group on a couple of Glasgow Warriors forums that have an unbelievable hatred of Byron McGuigan, and every time his name gets mentioned, it's like you've said Voldemort. It's just like
Why?
unbelievable.
Did he? I don't recall him doing anything untoward.
No, people
he was
just
a
thought he was
decent
a
player.
bit rubbish at Glasgow. That's the thing. People were of the opinion he was just about mince.
Well, I think he left under a cloud, didn't he? I think that's the.
I didn't think it was much of a cloud. It was just more he wasn't getting any game time because we had sort of prime DTH, Tommy Seymour, Bennett and Dunbar. I think he played a couple of times at outside centre, but I don't think he left under a cloud. And he's a decent player. You know, he's no worse than, say, Ratu Tagive, for example.
That's exactly the name I was going to mention. Yep.
Yeah.
Is he any worse than him? Absolutely not.
Yeah. On that note, we'll bring it to a close for this week. We're going to go off now and we're going to record our special patron-only episode. So if you want to listen to that, you're going to have to sign up for our patrons. So visit scottishrugbyblog.co.uk and you can sign up for that. This episode will be available on podcasts tomorrow as well as the Patreon-only one. Quick update, point of fact, I think we've had a fact check. Kirk James has got in touch on Facebook to say that Dale Winton was the host for Hole in the Wall. Of course, bring on the wall.
Was it not him? I thought that Anton Dubek did it actually.
I think he did it after Dale Winton. I think Dale Winton started
Was
it.
there 2 series? Oh my god, it lasted more than.
Oh, lasted for a while. Harry Hill used to cover it on TV Burp.
Oh yeah, I love Harry Hill's TV.
Dale Winton and Anton Dubek, there is that's a second row partnership right there. Can you imagine that? Like that would have been class stuff.
Longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions of all time. What's happened there?
Kirk James has also messaged to say that he used to be Johnny Gray's janitor too, and that feels like that needs for some unpicking. So Kirk, do you drop us if you were Johnny Gray's janitor? Please get in touch and tell us what that entailed.
I am friends with Kirk. I regularly see Kirk, and Kirk is a massive Johnny Gray fan and talks regularly about the Gray Boys. So
was he a janitor for Johnny Gray?
He is also he is a janitor. So
I thought you were going to say I know Kirk and he's a massive liar. So don't believe a word he says.
Don't believe any of his mints. No.
So hopefully we'll try and get an update on what kind of janitoring Kirk did for Johnny Gray.
I think that's like a Where's Dougie Donnelly right there.
That definitely is.
Is it school-based janitoring?
We'll find out. There we go.
Ian,
Maybe we'll make it a patron only. And an exclusive interview with Johnny Gray's janitor.
There you go. Kirk's been asking to come on, so there you go. That's his opportunity.
Well, that's it from this week for us for the regular podcast. So for the moment, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from John and Ian.
Night, folks.